Three meditations on the Supreme Goddess is our topic for today. Our speaker for today is Sri Ramachandra Rudam, and it is my pleasure to introduce him. Ramachandra Rudam is a sadhak and as a sevak serves as an administrator at Sanatan Siddhashram, Birbhum, West Bengal. This traditional center is dedicated to the ancient Baul tradition. He pursued his higher education in business administration at Sri Satya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. His Paramaguru is Sri Satya Sai Baba. Writings of Sri Aurobindo and the mother have been instrumental in shaping his spiritual journey. He recently published a book titled Devi Bhakti Tarangini, which comprises devotional poetry dedicated to the Divine Mother. Over to you, Ramchandraji.
I would like to open the talk with my prayers to the Divine Mother. Om Sarva Mangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute. Om Sarva Mangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute. Om Sarva Mangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Shri Mahaganapatiye Namaha. So we will be starting the talk. The talk is titled Three Meditations on the Divine Mother, on the Supreme Goddess. I hope it's audible and it's clear. Since this has connection to Pondicherry, just imagine ourselves in the ocean, suddenly in the middle of the ocean. And then we are supposed to talk about how is the ocean? Describe the ocean. What will you describe? You cannot describe anything. You cannot say, oh, there is that beautiful wave over there. That it's just ocean. It's just water. It's just everywhere, the vastness that you cannot say anything about. But what we can probably perhaps make an attempt is still, despite being in the middle of unfathomable vastness of the ocean, when we turn our gaze inwards, we still feel the throbbing and pulsation of the ocean. If we have the courage and if we are fearless at that juncture, when we are thrown into the unknown, still we can make sense out of it. Still we can make an attempt to fathom it from the point where we are there, how we feel this throbbing, how we feel this pulsation. That is with what intimacy that you are in oneness with the ocean. So a similar attempt I would try to make today when I am here to talk and share some of my reflections, some of the sadhana reflections, some of the reflections and meditations on the Divine Mother. I would be talking from the perspective where I stand in my inner journey and how I feel her pulsation and her throbbing, her guidance, her inspiration, her motivation, how she moves me. It is from that space I make an effort to share. But why meditate on Mother? And what does it lead to? Perhaps this question, what does it lead to, is the most redundant one in my view, because we just have to simply meditate on Mother because that makes her happy. If you have, just imagine your mother is happy, there is 99.99% that you are likely to be happy in the home wherever you are. She's going to keep you happy. Of course, mother's nature of sacrifice and adapting to the challenges, that she tries her best to make you happy at every circumstance. But I think it's a double bonanza offer for us. When our mother is happy, then the chances of our happiness just increase manifold. So keep our mothers happy. And it is the same reason that why we will meditate on the Divine Mother. is essentially to make her happy by offering our devotion at her feet, and that is good enough reason. And for instance, in in this most famous thousand names composition on the Divine Mother in the Sri Vidya Parampara or Sri Kula Parampara is Lalita Sahasranama. And here, this is a beautiful literature, extolling the beauty of the mother, the divine nature of the mother, and what she has accomplished and what what she is to us in our relationship with her. But when you look at it, where did this come from? It is part of the Brahmanda Purana, and Hayagriva is the Devata. Hayagriva is talking to Sage Agastya and giving this secret out. Sage Agastya, by then, who has already done immense penance and tapasya to know about Mother and to attain her grace, who has done immense amount of tapasya, after that, still there is a longing for him to fulfill his own tapasya and penance. It is there that he receives this 1,000 names of Mother from Hayagriva. Now, but Hayagriva is not the originator of the 1,000 names, right? There are many 1,000 names of Mother, and this is one most important one that is emphasized for our purpose. And the 1,000 names have been written by Mother herself. How did she do that? After waging a war with Bhandasura, in order to vanquish him, that she appears on the screen of the great stage of the world order, and where there has been disorder because of this Asura, Bhandasura, and his army, that she comes to fight him. Just in a similar way as in the Devi Mahatmyam, how Divine Mother Durga comes into the picture to wage a battle against Mahishasura and the army, Shumba Nishumba. So here she appears onto this stage, and she is equipped herself, and she vanquishes the demon, and she is victorious, and she is happy in her victory, and she now takes her throne in the Shripura, and she sits on her throne uh, with that magnificence around her, and then she says, now I need to listen my own exhalation. I need to listen to something that is, I need to listen to a composition that will adore me. How do I do that? Who has that capacity to do that? And she looks at this godly gathering across, and then she says, nobody can extol me because nobody knows my tattva, what I am. Nobody can extol me because nobody can comprehend and fathom. Not even the gods of the gods can do this. Then she ushers from herself, we can call the Vagdevis. In some ways, they are also regarded as the Matrikas, that she emanates these powers out of herself. And then she tells them, now you compose. Because you have come from me, only you know my tattva. And it is them extolling her beauty, extolling her accomplishments, extolling her feats, her power, her all pervasiveness. In utter devotion and adoration, they compose 1,000 names of Mother. And that makes her happy. Right? So we have Happy Mother, who has described herself in 1,000 names and blessed us by asking us to recite these 1,000 names so that she is happy. So there is nobody who can comprehend her secrets. It is herself who comprehends her secrets. It is herself who composes the adorations for herself and gives us. And in adoration, we form a bridge between us and Mother. And that bridge is essential for a bhakta, for a sadhaka of the Divine Mother. Without that devotional bridge, without that impulse of constant contemplation, incessant contemplation and meditation on the Divine Mother, our sadhana does not bear fruits. nor as the bhakta of the mother, our life bears any fulfillment. So that is as simple as that. That is the reason we meditate on her. So the three meditations that we will be taking up today would be just to make her happy, and we pray together that she will be happy and she is present with us and she is connecting us through this talk. And after this talk, she will bless us to leave with deeper contemplations upon her and more strength and more Shakti in us to do her sadhana and to do her reflections. So, the three aspects that I chose today that I would be reflecting as part of the talk is one, to look at the Divine Mother as the tapasvin, as the yogini, as the Mahayogini, as the one who has impeccable capacity for the penance, and the one who has achieved the highest gnana. Now, one can say that what is there for her to achieve? But she has to set up an example for you and me, who are just like normal human beings, who are seeking constantly to overcome our own ignorance. So, that is one perspective that we will look at her. Then we will look at her as a warrior goddess, as a protectress. Then we will look at her and we will meditate upon her, we will reflect upon her tattva as the Jagadamba, the mother for the world order. So these are the aspects today we will meditate upon. So today I was just reflecting and I had shared it with some of my friends over social media as well, that what should be the reflection that I have to get in. And then I had this pulsation and I had this reflection coming into me. Looking at, and I must say that since this is Tantrotsava, which is essentially trying to make a culmination in Mahashivaratri, without paying obeisance to Sadashiva, Mahadeva, even mother will not be very happy. So let me get a little bit of reflections and flavor of him to help us. We even during when we do our sadhana, first we have to become Shiva in order to worship mother, the Shakti. So we have to invoke his blessings. And so I was reflecting that one of the greatest devotees of Lord Shiva is Ravana, right? And he's really, his devotion translates into his ability to do tapasya. And his devotion also and his tapasya also has blessed him with immense amount of gnana, and he has Brahma Tejas. And the gnana which has really galvanized and charged his gnanendriyas, and he has this Brahma Tejas. And how does his Brahma Tejas manifest as a manifold and as a tangible reality or a symbolic reality? So sage Valmiki writes about him as the Dashakanta, as the 10-headed. He is the one who is 10-headed. The 10 heads simply are a power statement about Ravana as the Mahatapasvi, somebody who has gained immense amount of knowledge, that he needs at least 10 heads to contain that knowledge, at least in a symbolic way to say. But what happens is that he's not only the Brahma Tejas, he has this great ambition to rule the worlds. And he has the Sankalpa Shakti, he has the Tapo Balam, which gives him immense amount of willpower to rule the worlds. So there is this great potent combination of great Gnana in him and great Tapo Shakti in him and ambition to rule. What more one wants to clinch the deal? And so he starts ruling the world. But that's not a problem. The problem comes in when he gets onto an ego trip, right? And then he, at some point in time, he desires to have the Kailasha to be moved towards him. Of course, he goes to do his penance and attain great, do his tapasya and attain great knowledge from Shiva. And upon his Ghora tapas, and because he is coming up with a very unreasonable sankalpa, Shiva is not responding in such great tapas. His ego bursts out, and with all his 10 heads, he starts lifting the Kailasha. Now, Kailasha is what? Kailasha is not only just abode of Lord Shiva, but Kailasha is the abode of the ultimate Gnana. And you would see this again and again in many, many Sthala Puranas of the many Kshetras also that we visit, that there is some connection that, oh, Brahma has brought a piece of Kailasha here. Somebody has brought some stone from Kailasha over here, a small hillock from here to the down part of the southern part of India. So Kailasha is bringing in the knowledge. So when he is trying to do that impossible, Shiva stamps him and totally stamps out his ego, right? And it is his ego trip which has translated his great gnana and great tapobala and changed the course of his life towards self-destruction. That is the Ravana for us. So this is despite being the great devotee of Shiva. Another great devotee of Shiva, and perhaps the greatest of the Ganas, the Pramada Ganas, is Nandi, Nandishwara. Nandishwara is steadfast. He is looking at Shiva with an unwavering focus and meditation. He is resolved, he is thira, he is seated completely, absolutely in stillness to observe Shiva, and he has merged all of his being completely in Shiva. He is the vehicle of Shiva. So, what does it mean to be the vehicle of Shiva? To be the vehicle of Shiva means to give up your Gnanendriyas, that is your Manobuddhi Chitta Hankara, and your organs of perception, organs of knowledge, organs of seeking, and organs of Kriya, the Karmendriyas. Everything is surrendered to Shiva. Only then you can become the vehicle of Shiva. Only then Shiva sits on you and says, go here, you will go there. That means all your being has to be a complete offering to Shiva. And there has to be a complete self-effacement of yourself to be that high order devotee, to become the vehicle of Shiva. But even he has suffered at times from jealousy and also pride. There are instances when great Maharshis have come to have the audience of Shiva. He would stand because he was the gatekeeper. So in order to attain the Shiva Gnana, everybody has to pass through Nandi. Right? So, but he used to be the gatekeeper, and then he would perhaps mock at them and out of his pride. So despite being in such ultimate absorption of Shiva, there is a room when there is distance between you and Shiva that something can enter. So now we are searching for an example that is impeccable, that is impenetrable in its power and in its strength. Who is there? That who is completely one with Shiva. That is when we look at our Divine Mother, Parvati, as she as a devotee, she has attained union with Shiva. She as his companion has attained union with Shiva. She as a tapaswin has attained Shiva Gnana and attained oneness with Shiva. Right? So that is why we look at the Divine Mother. So this attainment in a way is integral. In so many ways, it is a complete integral union. It is so integral that there is hardly any difference between Shiva and Shakti. She is perhaps but the extension of the Shiva's will. And here I would request Deepaji to just put this image on the screen, because we will be meditating a little bit on this aspect of the Divine Mother. Deepaji, if you could just put that image. Yeah, so here we are looking at this image wherein this is a very classical agamic instruction. From Agamas, this murti is made, wherein Shiva is in embrace of Shakti. And you can see a small mirror on her left hand, which is very difficult to trace, but if you look at it keenly. And this is a mirror unlike any other mirror. This is not a mirror which is to look at her own beauty, But this is a mirror to reflect the essence of Shiva. What is essence of Shiva? The whole creation is essence of Shiva. And she is, her Shakti is the reflexive nature, the reflection, the ability to reflect the essence. And this is what is called in classical terms as the Vimarsha Shakti, the one who has the capability to reflect the essence of Shiva. So when we look in the mirror, what we look at is Shiva in his full manifold manifestation as this universe, and he as the essence of the universe. It is just another way to say universe is nothing but extension of Shiva, and he is all pervading in universe. But how did this manifestation was it enabled? It is by the Vimarsa Shakti. So just imagine the capacity of the mother to make the unmanifest manifest. She is the Chit Shakti which can attain this impossible feat. For her to attain this level of oneness, unless she has this complete oneness, where she is not there anymore, she is non-existent, and only Shiva is all pervading through her action and through her kriya, through her gnana and through her ichha. And it is that she is who is the comprehensive Shakti which has made this miracle possible. That is the high order tapasvi, right? That is the level of tapasvi. And this is the mother, this is the divine mother. And this is what we have to aspire for as we come closer to Mahashivaratri, to contemplate on Shiva, to bless us with this capability to have an integral oneness, complete union with him in his gnana, to attain his gnana. Thank you, Deepaji. Now we can take this image out. There are more reflections on the same lines, that when she as Uma is aspiring to marry Lord Shiva, she wanted Shiva as her husband, then she sets her foot for tapas. And parents say, please do not do that. Do not leave us and go. You don't have to take so much struggle, because she was daughter of a king. She had no obligation to do such a hard penance, but she was determined, and she was so determined that she came to be called as Aparna, because for many thousands of years, the Shiva Mahapurana says probably 50,000 years of penance that she has done. That for long years, she has not eaten anything, but she lived on she lived on leaves, she lived on probably fruits, and so she came to be called as Aparna because of that reason. She surrounded herself with the fire. She kept increasing her tapo agni, and she started standing on a single feet, and then started doing tapas. Her nails started growing and her jada started growing. She never gave up during the seasonal changes. She never gave up. So much so that she literally planted saplings around her, and she grew a forest around her. So just imagine, growing a forest takes such a long time. And the forest grew around her, and it is still that she is continuing her penance. This is the standards of sadhana that she has set up. Over and above that, in sadhana, one of the most obvious things that comes is demotivation. That comes to us. The demotivation manifested in her regard that despite so much penance, there is no clue of Shiva, there is no appearance of Shiva. Then her parents came and persuaded her. Then Narada came and told that, what are you trying to do penance for? For this beggar, or who sits in the cremation ground? This is what you are aiming for? And complete demotivation. But she has never given it up. She was steadfast, and she persisted. Eventually, Shiva himself comes in a disguise as a sage, I think. And then he says, why are you doing this penance? This is not worth it. Don't even try that. You should give it up now. She did not give up. And eventually, she became victorious in her tapasya. So that is the Divine Mother and her determination to attain Shiva Gnana. Because she attained Shiva Gnana, she is called Gnana Prasunamba. Attaining Shiva Gnana gives a lot of joy, right? Ultimate bliss. She is Prasunamba. Mother who is completely in prasannata. having attained the Shivagnana. And if you actually visit Srikalahasti, which is not very far from Tirupati, and it is one of the Panchabhuta Linga Pratishtapana, and it is the Vayu Linga. For instance, Chidambaram is the Akasha Linga of Shiva. And I might take a little divergence here in order to reflect a little bit about how our kshetras are envisioned, right? And so the story goes of this kshetram, the Sthala Purana, is that the Brahma did his penance and wanted a piece of Kailasha, and he took a hillock of Kailasha and he brought it and placed it in the southern part of India in Bharatakanda. And so one has to contemplate, how did he lift something so heavy? How did Hanuman lift a heavy mountain? How did he lift it? So from a yogic insight, there has to be a material change. The material, which is earth, which is heavy, has to become lighter, right? In the Ashta Siddhis, you have Anima, Garima, and all of these Siddhis, in which the matter can be made into light. So how can a mountain or a hillock can be lifted? So here it was lifted and it was made light by the Prana Shakti, by the Vayu Shakti. And then it was placed again, and again the heaviness was induced in it, and it was placed down, and that is where the Srikalahasti formed, and that is where the Shiva Pratishtha happened. And it is here, and you would see it as the Panchaprana Pratishtha. You will see the 5 lines on the Shivalinga over there, and it's very interesting how they place a small lamp near that Shivalinga, and the belief over there is that you can always feel, by looking at the lamp, the Prashvasa Nishvasa of the Shiva, the breath of Shiva, and then there is the subtle movement of the lamp, Srikalahasti. And this is the yogic feat that has been achieved in our temples. So when we are going to a temple, we are not just going to any temple. This is a kshetra filled with the power of the Yoga Siddhi. Now, having the Yoga Siddhi is one. To have a science of Agama knowledge to how to encapsulate this Siddhi and construct a kshetram which will not lose this power is another challenge, right? And that is what has been achieved by our profound insights into existence, into reality, into universe. This was the great accomplishments of our sages and yogis, Mahayogis. So here Mother came and she did, in the Sthala Purana, it is said that she did the japa for 50 lakhs of Om Namah Shivaya, the Shiva Panchakshari. And then she attained the Gnana of Shiva. And she is called Gnana Prasunamba. So again, there is this standard, of doing immense amount of penance. Again and again, she is telling us, in order to attain the Shiva Gnana, what is the level of sadhana that one needs to do? What is the level of penance one needs to do? What is the level of focus one needs to have? What is the determination and steadfastness one needs to have in one's heart? Right? So that is Mother as Tapaswin. Gnana, which is the Sattva nature, which is in the nature of the Sattva, the Gunas, Sattva, Rajo, Tamo, Gunas. This is the highest illuminated knowledge of finding union, a complete surrendering union, complete integral union with Shiva. That is the meditation upon her as the great Tapaswin. Now let's reflect upon her as a warrior goddess. Now let us reflect a little bit upon her as the great protector. Allow me to, I would request you to be meditatively present with me as I chant Durga Suktam, and then let me reflect a little bit upon that, which is a good primer for us to meditate upon Mother on this bhava, right? ॐ जातवेदसे सुनवाम सोममराति यतो निदहाति वेदः स नः परिषदति दुर्गाणि विश्वा नावेव सिन्धुं दुरितात्यग्निः तामग्निवर्णां तपसा ज्वलन्तीं वैरोचनीं कर्मफलेषु जुष्टां दुर्गां देवीगुं शरणमहं प्रपद्ये सुतरसितरसे नमः। अग्ने त्वं पारयानव्यो अस्मान् स्वस्तिभिरति दुर्गाणि विश्वा भूष्व पृथ्वी बहुलान उर्वी भवातोकायतनयाय शय्यो विश्वानिनो दुर्गः जातवेदः सिन्धुन्न नावा दुरितातिपरिषि अग्ने अत्रिवन्मनसा गृणानोऽस्माकं बोध्यविता तनूनां पृतनाजितगुं सहमानमुग्रमग्निगुं भुवेम परमासदस्तात् स नः परषदति दुर्गाणि विश्वाक्षामद्देवो अतिदुरितात्यग्निः प्रत्नोषिकमीड्यो अध्वरेषु सनाच्च होता नव्यश्च सत्सि स्वाञ्चाग्ने तनुवं पिप्रयं स्वा सौभगमाय जस्वा गोभिर्जुष्टमैजो निषिक्तं तवेन्द्र विष्णोरनुसञ्चरेम नाकस्य पृष्ठमपि संवसानो वैष्णवीं लोक इहमादयन्ताम् ॐ कात्यायनाय विद्महे कन्याकुमारी धीमहि तन्नो दुर्गिः प्रचोदयात्। This Durga Suktam comes from the Vedas, comes from the Rig Veda, and it is also part of it. It is debated by the scholars, comes from elsewhere, but it doesn't matter. It has become a very integral part of the Shakta Parampara, where the Shaktas worship the Divine Mother as the ultimate reality. She is the top of everyone, right? She is the supreme goddess. That is what we are meditating upon. Now this has become a integral aspect for the Shakta Paramparas to look at her, and perhaps Durga Devi is one of the most ancient forms of the Divine Mother. We have these two pulsations, two perceptions of Mother as the one who is the Jagadamba, and the aspect of the fertility is associated with, which we will be reflecting in due course, and as the protector, the ultimate warrior protector, who protects our lands, who protects everything that is dear to us, and who bestows upon us the protection and the auspiciousness. These are the two most ancient views, perhaps, of the Divine Mother, and she comes from probably the northwestern frontiers and has entered into it and entered into the Vindhyas, right at the center of the Bharata Khanda, right? So I am not doing a line-by-line translation, but I want to read few of these lines in English, which gives the essence of this suktam. One from whom the Vedas are born, Jata Vedas, one who consumes by her fire all adversities and frees us from the bondage of the world. We invoke her ardently to carry us over the ocean of samsara. May her grace be the boat. Naveva Sindhum Duritatyagnihi. Nava, the boat. Her grace is the boat. One who is in the color of the fire, birthing out of the fire, Vairochanim, emanating out of the fire, blazing with tapas. We invoke her to release us from the bondage. O Mother, may your auspiciousness make the land fertile and fill us, your children, with bliss. O great fire of Durga, who is invincible in battle and charges ahead in terrible manner, thus conquering the enemies and burns them into ashes. We invoke her with great reverence. Make our senses, mind, and heart full of bliss. May they become unattached. May they be infused with your devotion. May they be intoxicated with your blissful nature. So, that is the essence of Durga Sukta, one of the most ancient. Perhaps this had become the basis on which, in fact, the whole template and the vision and the great vision of Devi Mahatmyam emerged, wherein she took a full-blown presence as Durga, and her Purana started extolling her, and she became a goddess who would be worshipped across India. Now coming to India, and the goddess being worshipped across India. In fact, the great many sages, even in the recent years, have identified that if there is one protector for the destiny of this country, of the Bharatakanda, that is Durga. This is how we have seen her repeatedly, as even as a mother India. If you see the pictures that are given, she is the one who is riding the lion. Who has the lion as the vehicle? It is Durga, right? She is the Chandi Bhava. She is the one who is taking care of this country, and this is our destiny is in her hand. This is at least the belief of the great many sages, including someone like Sri Aurobindo, who had put this forward with great force. Whole freedom struggle was galvanized with this vision of being really blessed by her power and her tapas, her doing tapas to her and gaining her grace. And she goes way back in Mahabharata. Arjuna invokes her, right before the battle. Krishna tells Arjuna to invoke Durga to have victory, to overcome the obstacles, right? And you have, she is there across the length and breadth of the country. She is there as the Vaishnav Devi in Kashmir. She is there as the Chamundeshwari in Mysore. She is there as the Durga Ma and Kamakhya in the eastern part of India. And she is there as the Bhadrakali for the Kakatiyas. And she is there as the Bhadrakali for the Kalari practitioners, Kalaripayattu practitioners, and who have established her as the presiding deity to gain the power and strength that she bestows upon the warrior clan of the southern warriors, right? And she is there as the Bhavani who has been worshipped by the Chhatrapati Maharaj, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. So she galvanized our aspiration. She galvanized our Kshatriya Tejas. She galvanized our power and determination to be the warriors of this land. And it is she, and she alone, reverberates across the length and breadth of the country. And losing our connection with her weakens us, and in fact has weakened us. And it is the time, perhaps, we reflect collectively to gain back our control over our destiny and put her as the leader and follow her as the leader and pray to her to give us the strength. But this is at a collective level and a collective destiny level. Let us get her more intimate to us as a sadhak. This is the true battle. The true battle is not just about going to the office and coming back and doing our pursuits endlessly, trying to fulfill the cycles of endless desires and the demands, and being like totally hopeless, helpless cork which is being pushed by this tide and that tide on the ocean, and feeling absolutely helpless. This is not what we are meant. We have to be, like Swami Vivekananda says, that what is the point if you have not captured the control over your lower prakriti? Just finish your life, and there is no point in that, right? It's just total waste sitting and cribbing about it, right? There has to be a complete sense of mastery over your lower prakriti, on your desires, on your impulses. That is when you are beginning to live life, at least in a perceptibly meaningful way. Otherwise, we are just being pushed by left, right, center, by anything and everything. So when we sit on the seat of the sadhana, the true battle starts. When we close our eyes, the true battle starts. All vasana samskaras push from the nether world and plague your mind and create and intensify your conflicts. All that is what is happening is taken in the pristine form and served to the sadhaka to battle it out. At that point in time, we have to overcome that enemy, and we need her protection. By any chance we gain some Shakti, we gain some Siddhi, we need her protection. By any chance we make any progress, we need her protection not to lose that progress, not to go back 10 steps backwards. To have the willpower and determination to be seated and continue, to have the determination to walk and do sadhana, to have the determination to open our eyes and do sadhana, to have the determination to live the life fullest to the sadhana's capacity, and infuse the life with the Shakti Sanchalanam, the movement of the Shakti which has a transformative capacity to make us from a helpless folks who are riddled by the karmas that we have to endlessly fulfill, to be the masters of our own destiny. That is the aspiration and ambition that the sages of the Lord have put in front of us. And who better then the protectress and the warrior goddess who can inspire and infuse this strength and Shakti in us. So this is the meditation. This is the meditation upon the Divine Mother, the Shakti, the sadhana, the Rajoguna. The Rajoguna is not just about in the lower Prakriti where the endless desires are completely consuming you as an inner fire, but to turn that into a Ichcha, a primal will, to establish the Sankalpa, take Sankalpa and move in a certain direction. That is the true Rajoguna in its full blossoming, steadfast, sturdy nature and the robust nature, right? This she can confer on us. This she can grant to us, provided we are warriors. Now we will reflect. We have I would like to leave probably 10-15 minutes um, for reflections, for question and answers, if that is possible. But now let us reflect upon her as the Jagadamba. See, we have our mother in whose womb we have entered to start this journey. When we are in her womb, we have no clue what is happening with us. We hardly have any sentience. We hardly have any. Probably the gnana is there. Of course, it is there, but it is in a most subtlest way. But we are in complete reliance upon our mother, and she is taking care of us in the womb by eating proper food, doing probably the little exercises that she needs to do, ensuring that there is, her womb is totally protected and is not put through the stress. An extreme care is taken by mother. But why is she taking extreme care? To ensure that the child who comes out is of the most healthy in nature, that nothing happens to the child. But despite doing that over for 9 months, is the mother 100% sure that nothing happens to the child? At the time of the delivery, as the time the D-Day comes, as the time of birth of the child comes, her heart races, her heart pounds. All the effort that she has done for such a long time, hope, she prays hard that nothing happens to the child and the child comes out fully well. Right? That is the complexity of the birthing process. The insurmountable emotions are playing in the heart of the mother. And all of that bears an implication on us. Her concern, deep concern, is a nourishment for us in a way that we cannot even probably tangibly feel it, right, while in her womb. But at the end of the day, and at the final day of the birth, she's still unsure, despite taking the best of the measures, how the baby will be. So she is in a state of surrender. But surrendering to whom? Because there is another mother who is in complete control of the birthing process, and she is not tensed. She knows how the child is going to come out, because she is the one who has fashioned the child at every level, at the physical level, at the Annamaya Kosha, at the Pranamaya Kosha, at the Vijnanamaya Kosha, at the Anandamaya Kosha, at the Manomaya Kosha. She has nourished, she has taken care of the child, she has designed the child's destiny, she has put the seed of the child's destiny in a way, and she has fashioned, she has chiseled the child, and she knows very well how the child is to go and come out, and she is extremely neutral. She is not there to play the game of emotions. She is the one who is doing the clockwork of karma. As Mula Prakriti, she is working the process of creation. All that she has to do is what karma this child is going to work out in this life, what womb he has to enter, what has to be developed to what level, what constraints and challenges has to be borne by the child, what should be the strength of the mind of the child, what should be the willpower of the child, what should be the creativity part of the child, how the child is going to come out, what will be the circumstances in which the child will be born. Everything she is in full control of things, because she has to diligently work with the ticking clock of the dharma and the karma. And she is the one who is 100% sure how the child is going to come out, right? And that is, if our mother who has born us in the womb is Amba, this is Jagadamba. Right? And it is said that not just us, the microcosm, but even the macrocosm was birthed by her. And she is the ultimate Shakti after giving birth to the whole of the universe and to the individuals. She resides in us, coiled with the 3.5 coils in the Mooladhara, in the base of the spine, and she resides there. This is what we are supposed to be, relating as Kundalini. And now this Kundalini is a big fashionable word, awakening Kundalini and doing something, but it's extremely, nobody knows honestly what Kundalini is. It's a Avyakta Swarupa. Avyakta means it's the most secret of the secret Swarupas, but it is fashionable to talk about it nowadays. But nobody knows, nobody comprehends, nobody can comprehend what it is. Nobody can go into the heart of the Kundalini. All that we know is that she is seated and she is working out our karma very secretively. If at all that we have this aspiration, awakening of Kundalini, what happens is she is like the fire, and when she awakens, she burns our karmas at every kosha and she raises. And then the game is over. When karmas are gone, what are you there in the world for? What are you there to even achieve? What is the purpose? There is nothing in the world which has the capacity. The Pancha Mahabhutas do not have the capacity to take the full-blown Shakti of the Kundalini. They will dissipate unless there is a secret purpose, probably for the Mahasiddha. So it's not a game. It's not something that is fashionable aspiration and ambition. So don't play with that. And be very, very reverential to the Divine Mother and make her happy. Keep doing her adoration, keep doing her stuti, and her adoration is not adoration that is just of the Bhakti Bhava. Bhakti is, of course, the most fundamental bridge, but her adoration is, she is very, very particular about the Japa Vidhi. She is a perfectionist like Mahasaraswati, right? Every step is very, very clearly given. What needs to be done, what cannot be done, what you are doing. So this is a complete shastra in itself, the mantra shastra, the tantra shastra. Right? So this is Jagadamba. If you have to appease her, your standards of sadhana are just many, many fold. You need to have the Guru's grace flowing through you. Even in Lalita Sahasranama, there is a certain number, like from the numbers of 483 to 528. These names are called Yogini Nyasa, wherein Lakini, Yakini, Dakini, Rakini, various yoginis right from the Mooladhara, they are located up to the Sahasrara. What are they doing presiding in us? Right? They are the ones, they are developing our flesh. They are developing our organs. They are developing our blood. They are developing everything at a Manomaya level, at a Annamaya level. And this is what is given. In fact, this is very deeply connected with the Ayurveda. And many Ayurvedic practitioners who are the Tantropasakas, right? They understand these secrets of the Prakriti. And she is the one who is doing this miraculous work of bringing doing the magic of these chakras with the bhutas. And we do not know how she does. But what we can do is keep her happy. Be connected with her, have her grace upon us. Right? So that is the mother, that is the Jagadamba. In conclusion, I can only say this, that she is the ultimate Shakti. She is called Chit Shakti. A sadhaka of Divine Mother ultimately aims to recognize her as the Chit Shakti, the all-pervasive Shakti that pulsates, that sustains, that runs this universe, runs the life of the sadhaka, runs the individual, runs everything that is there as tangible, And this world is not taken as any random illusion, but an illusion is put upon our eyes by her Maya Shakti instead. She is the Chit Shakti, all presiding energy. She is the Ananda Shakti. She is the Shakti of the bliss. She doesn't need to pursue any desires to have the fulfillment of bliss. That is us, who are the Pashus, who are chained by our desires. We have to pursue a desire, fulfill a desire, dharmartha kama moksha, artha and kama. We have to take up those purusharthas, fulfill them in order to attain bliss. But she is the Swayam Siddha in the bliss. What does she have to pursue? She is already blissful, so she is Ananda Shakti. She is the Ichha Shakti who has put in the seed of the Ichha and the Sankalpa of the manifestation of the universe, and by contemplating upon her, we transform our desires, which keep us in the cycle of the birth and death, into potent desires which are in alignment with the primal will, that is the Ichha Shakti of the mother, to get out of this cycle, which appears to be like an endless, meaningless cycle, and that of the sukha and dukkha, that of the dualities, that of the raga dvesha, in order to break the chain and attain our true Gnana Swarupa. That is the Ichha Shakti. And she is the Gnana Shakti. Like we have discussed about Gnana Prasunamba, she doesn't have to do any sadhana in order to attain Gnana, though we have discussed and contemplated and reflected upon how she has set the benchmarks, but she is the Swayam Siddha. She is only the Shakti as the will of the Ishvara, right? And ultimately, she is the Kriya Shakti. She is the one who infuses our karmendriyas. She is the one who infuses our life with the dynamism. She moves, she pulsates, and she gives a complete fulfillment of this universe as well as us. So, to that mother, we should bow down. And in conclusion, I would like to just read a poem from the book which was mentioned in the introduction, Devi Bhakti Tarangini, which is a small book which has 20 poems that I have written in English as my offering to the Divine Mother. And here I would like to read the poem of her as Mahamaya. This I had written when I was doing my one of my sadhana visits to Kamakya. And Mother, O Mahamaya, your ways are inscrutable. Compassion and wrath you serve with love. In your swirls and twirls, you throw our life haywire. None can untangle your knots. Our achievements, our strides, our consummation, our fate are but puppets, hanging at the end of countless strings, held by you, pulled by you, cut by you, attached by you at your will. As we enter new life, as we depart from this life, we await our turn at your threshold to end this journey. But you set us on the stage once more, whispering into our ears that we are the lords of our life. We adorn this redemptive life, play our role as perfect puppets, ever waiting for the string to be cut forever. Dhanyavad. I think we have another 5-7 minutes. So I just like to open it for Q&A if there is any. Thank you.
The chat box is open. You can, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat box and I'll read it out loud. So we can get an answer for it.
I see a lot of my friends, probably they would think that probably they have their own ways to get answers from me in some other forum. Let's see.
A question that we have got is, can you elaborate a bit on Mahamaya?
Divine Mother as the Maya Shakti, it depends. The word Maya has many connotations coming from the diverse schools, but within the Shakta worldview, She is the one who, at an ultimate level, achieves something that is impossible, right? That is making the one into multitude and many. That she achieves through her mysterious ways. So, hence, she is the Mahamaya. She also turns our life into that of a bondage. She makes us the Pashus. Pashu means what? Pashu means one who is with the Pasha, and something is holding us to our neck. So we are Pashu. So, however far we want to go, but there is a thread that is pulling us. So, we will be roaming around within that limitations. The Pasha is going to cause the limitations. So, she puts these Pashas on us, right? And so that we fulfill our karmic journey. And she is the one who can take out these Pashas also, as by her grace. So, there again, she is Maya. She is Maya in ways that she conceals the knowledge, and she is also the one who can make the knowledge appear. There is a Unmesha Nimishotpanna. There is a name of Devi in Lalita Sahasranama. Means it's not creation as in happening from point A to gradually developing into something else. Unmesha Nimisha, right? And she's appearance and disappearance. She can just make it happen. It is just appearing and disappearing. What is appearing? The world is appearing. What is disappearing? Shiva is disappearing. What is appearing? When there is liberation, Shiva is appearing. What is disappearing? The world is disappearing. Who can do this magic? It is the Maya. It is the mother. Right? It is the ultimate Shakti. So these are some of the reflections of the Mahamaya. And she is also considered as the Yoga Maya, as the Vindhyavasini, residing in the Vindhyachal mountains. And she is the one supposed to be the sister of the Sri Krishna, who has taken actually the birth along with him to overcome the challenge of the Kamsa. Right? That is another connotation of the Yoga Maya. And as Yoga Maya, she is the one who is presiding over the sleeping Vishnu in the Kshira Sagara, and who in the Yoga Nidra, who is under the influence of the Yoga Maya. And she is the one who has to take out the wheel over the Vishnu, Lord Vishnu, in order to enable the sustenance of the creation which has to be created through Brahma. Right? So these are all various reflections of Yoga Maya. So there is another question, right, from Vamshi. I think probably this is the last question I will have to take, given there is a time constraint. He said, you spoke about growing from being thrown around by our lower nature to taking life into our hands. How does one do this, especially in the context of vital? How does one open one's lower vital to Divine Mother's influence? Vamshi is using a very specific word in this called vital, which is actually used in, especially strongly used, more famously used in Sri Aurobindo's Integral Yoga, coming more as an inheritance from our animal life, so to say. So how do we transform this, which is so strong in their grip in us, when we aim at this transformation in our sadhana? One of the most strongest ways to do it is to cultivate the bhakti in us. Because bhakti is nothing in a way that it's a transformed higher nature of the vital. Because if we have a desire, we turn it towards the divine. And if we have an instinct, we channelize all our actions and dynamism towards the divine. So this kind of channelization and transformation can happen by cultivating in oneself the bhakti. Of course, the yoga sadhana, one has to do all their japa vidhi or whatever is the other sadhana that is there. But bhakti is the one which sublimates and takes this lower nature of the vital and transforms it into something which is more dynamic and can help us move with greater force in our sadhana progress. Yeah. So that is for Vamshi. Yeah, I think that's sharp 7:30. So
tomorrow's session will be experiential, and it will be conducted by Hema Rajaraman, and the topic is Shiva, the cosmic dancer. Please join us tomorrow at 6:30.